La ikraha fi din does not apply to the fiqh aspect of things. If you already chose Islam, you chose Islam. You don't get to pick and choose which parts of Islam to follow.
Exactly. But don't listen to anyone and everyone who tells you something is halal or haram.
Yeah.
Just go research a bit. Sometimes it just takes as much as opening a risala amaliya. Again, we must stress the fact that the mujtahid does not remove the rules from his own pocket, as like we say in Farsi. You can't just say, oh, I don't want to follow it because it doesn't make sense to me. Like we've said, just because it doesn't make sense to a particular person doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it doesn't make sense to you per se.
Yeah. Probably
So the
like astrophysics doesn't make sense to me either.
But that doesn't mean the moon and the stars don't exist.
Exactly. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, brothers and sisters. Thank you so very much for joining us on yet another episode of Faraj podcast. We're here in the studio with my lovely friend and sister in faith, Sister Siddiqa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So on the previous episode, we talked about ijtihad. We talked about this vast, comprehensive scope of knowledge and sciences a person has to obtain and acquire in order to be a mujtahid.
Mujtahid, not Marja Taqleed, yeah? We're still at mujtahid.
We're still at mujtahid. There's a difference. Surprise, surprise. I know. And also, we sort of delved a little bit, very, very briefly into what each of those topics are.
And we did 17, but like we say, it's just scratching the surface.
Scratching the surface, absolutely.
So, and that 17 took us quite a bit of time to get through.
It did. Just that 17, and it's not even the whole list. So you guys, go figure. But now, here's what I'm wondering, right? And maybe this is the reason why we even decided to talk about the topic of ijtihad, mujtahid, this and that. I've actually come across physical human beings, right? They weren't imaginary. There were real human beings who used the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah. La ikraha fi din, right? There's no compulsion in religion. And they use that verse to say that you can't force me. You're not my mom. Why do I need a mujtahid?
Like we mentioned the start, right? The mujtahid is not going to force you. He's going to give you the rulings. Because you see, your mind and your duty is to act by the ahkam and the fiqh. What we have to do is now, either I go research myself, which is not going to happen because we all love our YouTube and crisps. Let's face it, we all love YouTube. I mean, if you sit on YouTube, you never become a mujtahid.
True. It's a sad truth.
So while we're sitting, and while this is also going on in YouTube, incidentally, the irony. So basically, either we go research ourselves, or we follow someone who's
done the research,
for us. And therefore, taqleed has undergone its own meaning, a change in meaning. Maybe at one point it would have meant blind following. It doesn't mean blind following anymore. It means with your own ikhtiyar, with your own
volition.
Yes, you go and choose a mujtahid who's the most alam, and then you follow what he said.
And mind you, just to choose a mujtahid, you have to do a reasonable amount of research for that as well. Yes. It's not like you reach the age of 9 as a girl, 15 as a boy, and then pop, you receive this card from Hogwarts that tells you this is your marja. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way.
You have to go do research, see who says what, and a lot of times you have to feel it out, who's more
and compatible. A lot of the times we can't even do that. Now we go to the next beat. Then now we have a group of people who actually go to the Darsul Kharaj of different mujtahids. In this case, now we're talking about marja. They go to the Darsul Kharaj of different marja, then ascertain who is the most knowledgeable. Then they bring it down to, right now we have the 6 main ones. So you have Sistani, Ayatullah Sistani, Ayatullah Khamenei. I believe Ayatullah Wahid is on the list over there. So we have 6. I remember 3 right now. But
look it up, guys. This you can do. So... right. You choose one out of your volition after you've done a bunch of research. You've consulted people, just like if you want to buy a car. But this is more important because it's this world and the next.
Yes. So coming back to the whole la ikraha fi din thing, yeah? So first, like Raha Fiddin does not refer anything to fiqh at all. It has nothing to do with
What
fiqh.
does it have to do with?
So basically, that's one step back.
Uh,
If we were to assume that rulings in religion are based on choice, that is quite irrational. Because God has sent the Quran, has sent the Prophet, 124,000 according to the Hadith. He has sent the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. After that, if you're a 12 Shia, you have the 12 Imams. All of them, just to tell you, please choose whatever you want to do.
oh, and when you put it that way, it sounds kind of silly.
Exactly. It is very silly. What it actually means is, it refers to there is no compulsion in choosing religion. That means I cannot take your throat, put you on a stone and tell you, choose Islam or I'm going to kill
else.
you. Like the ISIS used to do, right?
Yeah.
Or like the Taliban do. Choose religion, I'm going to kill you. It doesn't work like that. You have to choose with full faith in it. And then the interesting thing, this verse, when they called La Ikraha Fid Din, very interestingly, they miss out the next part of the verse.
Which is?
La Ikraha Fid Din قد تبين الرشد من الغي. The right way has become distinct from the wrong way.
Choose it yourself.
Yeah, it's very clear. Because it refers to faith, if it refers to your belief, God has sent you all this belief. It's very clear what the right way is, at least for one who's done the proper research. Yes, initially things don't seem very clear, but that's with everything. Even when I go to class in Usul, when we're doing Halakha Ula, nothing makes sense. You go to Halakha Thaniya, everything makes sense. Because initially nothing makes sense, but you have to keep on researching, and belief is like that.
Trust the process.
Yes, belief is like that. Look it up, look deep into it. Even the Quran uses a lot about this, it uses the intellect a lot. Like, have you not seen how we've raised the skies up? Or have you not seen, do you not wonder on who brings the rain down and stuff like this? It talks a lot about it. This verse has to do with belief, and belief, the fact that everything is clear for you and you choose the right way. So it has nothing to do with ahkam at all.
And when we say that everything is clear to you, it also depends on how much you've allowed your judgment to be clouded.
Exactly.
Right? By your own actions, by external influences, internal influences, by your own thoughts. Because, on one hand, because religion is a fitri, an innate thing, it comes to us naturally. But on the other hand, there also has to be effort and hard work put into it. Definitely. To acquire it and to preserve it and to practice it. And people sometimes miss that. They think that, if it's supposed to be natural, then why is it so gosh darn hard? And, everything is hard. Everything good and valuable in the life is supposed to be hard.
Everything is going to be hard. And when Allama Tabatabai in his Tafsir al-Mizan is writing the commentary on this verse, he says religion is a series of knowledge followed by practical actions, culminating in beliefs. So belief and faith are matters of the heart, where compulsion and coercion have no jurisdiction. That means you cannot exactly force a person to accept a belief. So if a person has to come with their own, belief is truly accepted when a person truly believes it with their own violation, when they accept it from their own heart and not the forced. Therefore, the verse is basically just saying that, look, you cannot force another person to change their religion, but you actually have, but we have made it so clear that they have to choose it themselves now. It has nothing to do with ahkam at all. So even those people who use it, again, are misjudging the verses and putting a tafsir from themselves, which is in fiqh, in tafsir we call tafsir bi-rai, tafsir based on their own opinions,
which is really forbidden. Like we're so warned against doing that. Just pulling things out of our own sleeves in regarding interpreting the Quran, because then we're going to be met with a lot of confirmation bias and personal bias and whatever suits my interests and my narrative better. And then the ego rears its ugly little head. Anyway, moving on.
When we go ahead, and even when we're looking at this verse, you see, Allah sent all these prophets. Now someone will come and say, fine, you know what, But there's a Quranic verse that actually talks about the fact that the Quran, that the Sharia is already revealed. It's not something you pick and choose. Like the one you say. Again, we must stress the fact that the mujtahid does not remove the rules from his own pocket. As like we say in Farsi. He's not taking it out from his own pocket. He is truly researched from the Quran and the Hadith. And the Quran says we've already sent you Sharia. Therefore, you can't just say, oh, I don't want to follow it because it doesn't make sense to me. Like we've said, just because it doesn't make sense to a particular person doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it doesn't make sense to you per se.
Yeah. Probably so like astrophysics doesn't make sense to me either.
But that doesn't mean the moon and the stars don't exist.
Exactly.
So there is a verse in the Quran, شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا وَالَّذِينَ أَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْكَ وَمَا وَصَّيْنَا بِهِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمُوسَى وَعِيسَى أَنْ أَقِيمُوا الدِّينَ وَلَا تَتَفَرَّقُوا فِيهِ. We've revealed to you everything. And we've made plain to you the religion. But the verse says, شَرَعَ لَكُم. He has made plain to you the religion of what he enjoined upon Nuh, and that which he revealed to you, and that which he enjoined upon Ibrahim and Musa and Isa, that keep to obedience and do not be divided therein. Therefore, this kind of asserts the idea, the religion is already revealed to you. Therefore, there's no, there's no different pathways. Although this verse goes towards kalam, is more a kalami verse, but that still comes to the idea that religion is already revealed. And there is no my way or the highway, basically. It's the Quran way or the highway.
Right. And there's no pick and choose either. You can't treat religion and shara like a buffet, And that's something that I see a lot. Even the Quran says يُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضٍ وَيُكَفِّرُ بِبَعْضٍ. I hope I didn't say that wrong. Anyway, you guys, search it. You can't buffet religion. You can't pick and choose, cherry pick. Oh, this suits me. This sits well with me. This makes sense. I like the vibe of that. I'm gonna do these things. And then the other parts that are a little harder to swallow, need more brain power to process and need more discipline to practice, I'd be like, yeah, no, I don't think God said that because it's so inconvenient. You know what I mean? And a lot of people do that. Maybe I even do that sometimes too. I ain't perfect. But that definitely does not give us the green card to, in any form or way, undermine the role of a mujtahid. Like you said, just because it doesn't make sense to you doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yes.
Maybe upgrade yourself. I'm just saying. I understand that there's so much more to talk about, right? And we can't fit it all into 20-minute podcasts, alas. But all right, supposedly we were able to answer the question that La ikraha fi din does not apply to the fiqh aspect of things. If you already chose Islam, you chose Islam. You don't get to pick and choose which parts of Islam to follow.
Exactly.
And which words of the mujtahid to listen to or not to listen to.
Given that the mujtahid is taking from the Quran and the Hadith.
The Hadith,
that is very stressed. That has to be stressed.
Right, because there are those out there who don't do that.
No, there are those out there who believe the Quran, that the mujtahid doesn't understand what the world is all about. He doesn't understand. Despite studying 60, 70 years, he still doesn't understand how to, all they come up with these. And I face this a lot with the idea that the mujtahid doesn't know what issues we are facing. But like we already said, that the ahkam doesn't change based on our own circumstances.
Yeah.
So I believe that there is this idea that the mujtahid should change the rulings, but the Quran doesn't change. So why would the mujtahid change the rulings?
Since we're already in the arena of what does the Quran say about this, which verse of the Quran applies to the matter of taqleed and ijtihad, what does the Quran say about taqleed even?
So there's a book by Sheikh Baqir Eravani.
Okay.
His books are used a lot in at least from the Muqaddamati to the Sathase of hawza studies. So when we enter hawza, when we're starting usul and fiqh, we would start off with his books because he's come along and really structured all the previous usuli works. And I mean, he's kept them intact, but he's just structured them out now. And he has a book on Ayatul Ahkam. And in one of those books, he talks about وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفَرُوا. sorry, I'll start that again. وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة يتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. I read the translation as well. And it is not for the believers to go forth all at once, for they should separate from every group. A division should go, obtain understanding in religion, and when they return, warn the people so that they may be cautious.
Wow.
يحذرون.
That is so concrete. What else are you looking for, Dige?
There's a whole tafsir to this verse as well. So basically, Ayatullah Sheikh Baqir Irvani, he goes into each of this, and he says, "Lawla," because the verse says, "Falawla nafara min kulli firqatin," because it says lawla. Lawla, if not, it emphasizes necessity. So when you're doing Arabic grammar, we mentioned Arabic grammar is important. Yep. Now we start to see it. Lawla emphasizes a necessity. And it also implies a level of obligation to migrate to gain this understanding. So the verse says, فَلَوْلَا نَفَرَ مِنْ كُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ مِنْهُمْ طَائِفَةً لِيَتَفَقَّهُوا فِي الدِّينِ. So go and get the knowledge, then come back. So there's a level of obligation to migrate to gain this understanding. يَتَفَقَّهُوا, to gain this
deep understanding.
Yes. And then it signifies that this obligation is sufficient for only a group from each faction. So from each group, only a few people go. So like you have a whole community, for example, let's say in one part of the world, a few people can go, gain the understanding, come back. Because it is aqli, it is just rational that not everyone can go and do it. In a society, you need doctors, you need drivers,
engineers and farmers.
And if they all had to, it would be the duty to do it. But because that duty would put great strain in a country or a society, therefore now it's like what we call wajib kifai, basically. Only if a few people fulfill that responsibility and then they come and teach, it's enough.
And again, this should not be mixed with that. This should not be confused with that hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that it's wajib upon every Muslim man and woman to acquire knowledge of their religion.
Exactly.
Because this verse specifically says tafaqquh, deep knowledge. There's a difference between knowing how to pray, how to fast, how to practice hijab, how to pay khums and zakat and stuff like that, which is the basic everyday layman knowledge every Muslim man and woman should have, and then the fiqhi aspect of it, which goes in depth regarding every detail that every Muslim should do at all times. There's a huge difference between the two. The first one, every Muslim man and woman should acquire knowledge of. The second one, let's leave it to the
specialists.
Yes, specialists.
And then he continues. So Sheikh Baqir Irvani continues. He says, this verse implies the permissibility and even the obligation of taqleed, emulation.
Because if someone from among you is going to go acquire this knowledge, what use is it if he comes back and you don't follow him? He
actually takes a different route. He says, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ. The verse says, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَحْذَرُونَ, so that you may be cautious. Now, how am I going to be cautious unless I follow the one who's...
Exactly.
So let me read the verse again. فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين لينذر قومهم, warn the people إذا رجعوا, when they return, إذا رجعوا إليهم, when they return, لعلهم يحذرون, so that they may be cautious. So the Quran is saying لينذر, warn the people, لينذر قومهم, warn the people so they may be cautious. How am I going to be cautious unless I'm following the person who's coming to warn me? And then he brings in another part as well. Another way to actually say that this verse also indicates, so now we discussed, the verse indicates obligation of acquiring religious understanding deep, يتفقهوا. And it implies obligation of emulation, يعني تقليد, because of the last part of the verse, لعلهم يحذرون. Then he says This verse also indicates the obligation of issuing fatwas. That is one who has already gained the deep understanding. Now it is obligatory on him to issue the fatwa through the term لِيَنْظَرُوا, warn them. Today you would warn a person by giving them, the right knowledge, basically.
Right.
And the only way we have today, or at least a systematic approach we have today, is through the Risala Amaliya, basically the book of laws. And then he says another verse, he brings إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْتُمُونَ مَا أَنزَلْنَا مِنَ الْبَيِّنَاتِ وَالْهُدَى مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا بَيَّنَّاهُ لِلنَّاسِ فِي كِتَابِ أُولَئِكَ يَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّاعِنُونَ. So those who hide the clear verses and the guidance we have sent down, after we have clarified them in the book, they should be the ones who are cursed by Allah and cursed by those who curse.
Ew.
So once a person who has gained all this knowledge, now he hides it, يَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَلْعَنُهُمُ اللَّاعِنُونَ.
The plot thickens. That's some scary stuff.
Exactly.
Like if you withhold that information and knowledge from people when you were clearly equipped with the faculties and the ability to convey God's religion to the masses, then you're in big trouble, bro.
There's actually let's say the opposite side. There's a beautiful hadith from Sadiq alayhi salam. And this is something that I would basically have been told at the start of my fiqh studies, right?
Right.
That don't give a fiqh ruling if you don't know. I go in society. So basically, because my fiqh was my special, I studied fiqh. And then you come in people and they'll tell you, someone told me I can't do this. Now this guy, someone has not studied fiqh. They just, there's a hadith that says, a person who issues orders or fatwas from their own opinions would be held by the neck on the day of judgment. So the one who studied has to preach it, but one who has not studied has to sukut.
Keep their mouth closed.
Exactly.
Wouldn't the world be a much better place if people who did not have adequate knowledge kept their mouths?
Actually, just kind of get into a joke. I had a question recently. Someone asking me if they can use an Android phone. Because the robot at the back of the Android logo is a robot. And the person who made it had an image of bringing to life something. Therefore, because the original creator of the logo wanted to give life to a robot. I don't know how true that is. Yeah? This is a person who asked me the question.
Right.
Therefore, we cannot use Android phones. And this is something he heard from somewhere. And I was like, I have an Android phone.
Oh my God. I think maybe the person who came up with this shubha was like maybe the marketing manager of iOS. Trying to encourage people to go out there and buy Apple phones. I don't know. That's wild.
Apple has its own conspiracy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the apple. Part of the apple is eaten. Therefore, it represents the Adam's apple that he ate in heaven.
Oh, iOS is the original sin. You heard it here first. Don't quote me. Don't quote me.
It's just basically trying to take home the fact that don't listen to anyone and everyone who tells you something is halal or haram.
Yeah.
Just go research a bit. Sometimes it just takes as much as opening a risala amaliya.
And it's so easy. Nowadays, it's like an application on your phone.
The actual one is 4 volumes, right? The one that we have in our hand is 1 volume.
Yeah,
that means it's been condensed so much just to make it easier. And that even has been simplified by other scholars. So it's not even that difficult now. And you have access to so many scholars everywhere. So just go ask. Just don't give fatwa from yourself. It's like the Android and the iOS too.
No, that was too wild. You can't make that stuff up, man.
Let's summarize it.
Yep.
La ikraha fi din does not apply anywhere in ahkam, and it cannot be used left, right, and center. Just because you don't agree with a specific part of ahkam does not mean it can be used. And then we also have the verse of the Quran, وَمَا كَانَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ لِيَنْفَرُوا.
Which ayan of which chapter? Do you have that?
I didn't note it down.
Okay.
But the verse is there. So if this verse proves it indicates the obligation of acquiring religious knowledge, obligation of emulation, and obligation of issuing fatwas.
Right.
So we have evidence in the Quran to bring forward the idea that a mujtahid, in the current sense that we have, in the current structure that we have, is something that is not condemned in the Quran. It's not prohibited in the Quran. Rather, it is advised and to an extent even obligated.
So it's necessary to have a mujtahid, and it's necessary to do taqleed if you're not a mujtahid.
Or if you haven't studied yourself as
If
well.
you haven't studied yourself. And you guys can for sure do deeper research into this. Look up the verses that we discussed on the podcast. Share your thoughts and comments with us. What other questions you have regarding this topic? Because I do know a lot of people, especially our youth in our communities, be asking these questions, and that's okay. You know, we're allowed to ask questions and I feel like it is the job of Islamic centers, scholars, speakers, and even maraja and mujtahids to create that safe space for the people, for the masses, in order for them to express these concerns, ask these questions, explore the different dimensions of their beliefs, assess it properly so that they can come to a firm, concrete understanding of deen.
Yes.
That, you know, won't go up in smokes at the face of the slightest shubha or doubt, or you know, some schmancy dude on some mimbar saying cool things, and everything unravels all of a sudden. Ask questions, you guys. Ask questions. And stay in touch with your scholars and tune into the future episode of the show here on Faraj Podcast. Thank you so very much for being with us, Sister Siddiqa. And thank you to our brothers and sisters. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.